Now on Fall Like Sunshine on a Rainy Day, how the music came to Manchester via Tony Wilson. Check out the 24-hour Party People and the Factory Records Saga.
Once upon a time, in a city called Manchester, a group of men and women joined together to play and record music because they just wanted to. This group of proud Mancunians had an idea which became an independent record label, which became a successful global brand.
We had a funny system of, if someone wanted to do something, this is New Order's, particularly New Order Joy Division's democracy, if someone wanted to do something and said so, then we did it. With the exception of Hannett wanted to buy a Fairlight, not one in Hacienda, but basically, if someone said it, and I look back on it that as being, that allows you to spend the next 25 years moaning at the bugger who said he wanted to do that because it was a mistake.
There was no rules within Factory. There was no like, well, this is this plan and this is that plan. Yeah, if you could do it and you wanted to do it, then you did it.
It's like run as a communist committee, weren't it? Because Sony's a bit of a red on the quiet.
They didn't know what they were doing. They never owned a record label before. I'd never been in a group before. They'd never owned a record label before. We didn't know what we were doing, but it bloody worked, didn't it?
Sid Vicious was once asked whether when he made his music he thought about the man in the street, and Sid answered, no, I've met the man in the street, he's a... And that particular phrase is perhaps central to our philosophy.
Factory Records was an idea hatched by actor Alan Erasmus and Granada television journalist and presenter Tony Wilson. It would be influential beyond its lifetime and has inspired a new film, 24-Hour Party People, directed by Michael Winterbottom and starring Steve Coogan as Wilson.
He is a fascinating character and ultimately likeable, annoying and lovable, and passionate and uncynical.
I can't write songs, I can't sing, I can't design, can't book nightclubs, I don't do anything. I hang out with clever people for two reasons. One, I hang out with them because it excites me, and B, they can all blame me.
Tony is a great guy. I mean, he started us off. I won't knock him. I fell out with him a little bit when we finished the last album, but I made up with him since then.
He was incongruous, Tony Wilson, because he was a middle-class smart-ass in working-class culture.
And he's a character. I mean, I think, he's one of, the British music scene's great characters.
One of the things about reading the news is like you're reading things and you've got someone shouting in your ear all the time. So I've always found it fascinating how you can do that, to concentrate on two things at the same time. And that seems to be what he does in everything. It's like, I'm doing one thing, but really I'm doing something else. And do you do either of them very well? I don't know.
Although he wasn't instrumental in all the kind of music that came out of Manchester, he was always there when it came, whatever was happening. He always seemed to be there, if not at the centre of events, near the centre. He's kind of a Where's Wally figure.
I've always liked him, and people still find it amazing that we actually like him now. After all the money he cost us, and the mistakes he made. But I think we were all party to it, really. So
I have to say, it is very sweet that somehow by being involved with all these geniuses and hanging out with them, and because none of them like talking to the media or the press, and I'm just a journalist who does talk to anybody, it seems as if I take the credit. At least my life undeservedly is gilded by their achievements. But the price of that is being blamed for fucking everything.
Manchester in the late 1970s was a city whose glories seemed to be only in the past. The proud heartland of the Industrial Revolution, a hotbed of political movements, the birthplace of the railways, of the computer and the bouncing bomb, it had seen better days.
It was grim. There was chip shops. It was just chip shops. There was no fancy sandwiches, no slow roasted tomatoes in Manchester at that point. Now you can't move for them.
It was into this depressed environment that the Sex Pistols and punk unloaded their own musical version of a bouncing bomb at the Lesser Free Trade Hall on Friday the 4th of June 1976.
The first Sex Pistols gig, about 40 people turned up. It's like a Manchester City match in 1965 against Swindon, where only 6,000 or 8,000 turned up, but about 5 years later when they won the league championship, 40,000 people claimed they went, and it was a bit like that with the Pistols gig. But they claimed there were 43 people there. My memory is there was even less.
I saw an advert for Lesser Free Trade Hall, the Pistols, and that was it. Told Barney, and we went with his first wife, me, him, and her, to the first one, which was the one that's shown in 24-Hour Party People, which is quite accurate actually. It was pretty quiet, not many people dancing. They're all just like that.
And that Sex Pistols gig was like a catalyst. It set everything into light, and people kind of stormed off into their lives, realising that they could do something for themselves. They could make music or write or design or just think, drift. And it cracked everything open, cracked open routines. So I often put down the most important thing that happened in Manchester was, oddly enough, the visit of the London band.
And then me and Ucky had decided to start playing music. I got a guitar, he got a bass, and we started learning. And we decided that we needed a drummer and a singer, so we put an advertisement up in Virgin Records in Manchester in Piccadilly.
That advert led to the formation of Warsaw, soon to become Joy Division, a band made up of local lads Ian Curtis, Barney Sumner, Peter Hook and Steve Morris. They were managed by soon-to-be factory partner Rob Gretton.
When routine bites hard and ambitions are low and resentment rises high,
Wilson and Erasmus decided to organise a regular club night to showcase this new generation of bands. The factory night at the Russell Club in Hume was a great success. Among the first acts to perform there were Joy Division. The poster for the first factory night arrived late. Its designer Peter Saville was asked to become a partner in factory. His delivery times remained erratic, but his graphic work and the factory cataloguing system influenced a generation. In September, Wilson used an inheritance to fund a factory sampler. Its artists would have only one form of contract. Written on a napkin in Wilson's own blood, it stated that the artists owned everything. The EP was produced by new factory partner Martin Hannett. The legendary Hannett was a singular producer whose work with Joy Division is timeless.
There is no other producer like Martin Hannett. And again, Martin wouldn't have found work anywhere else but factory.
The guy's a producer, he's asleep under the desk. Now.
Well, I think Hannett is sort of, he's not underrated, but I think he stands up to me more than any engineer, producer from the 80s actually, because his stuff sounds incredibly fresh now. In the movie, I didn't know much about him, and when I saw bits in the movie that made me laugh, his madness.
His famous line was telling Joy Division to play faster but slower. Now, that line sounds like somebody just either joking or being deliberately oblique or just being eccentric. But I think Martin Hannett really meant it when he said play faster but slower. And I do think that Joy Division finally, after thinking about this, did play faster but slower. And the result was Unknown Pleasures.
I'd sit that side, Barney would sit that side, and he'd go, psst. And I go, the snare's not loud enough. And he goes, it's your turn to tell him. I go, fuck up, you tell him. And I go, no, fuck up, you tell him. And I go, Martin, and he goes, what do you fucking want now? And I go, just said the snare doesn't seem like a fuck off! And we'd sit there like that, and Barney'd be going, "It's your turn now." And Barney'd go, "Marty," and he'd go, "Fucking, what do you fucking want?" like that. And it was like that all the time.
Sometimes you just spend 2 or 3 hours just listening to the return of a reverb. So he could really get into it. Yeah, it was completely a one-off experience.
He locked himself in a room doing cocaine, and he just said, "If I hear anything I like, I'll come out." He never used to come out.
When I was in high school, I pretty much only had 2 musical heroes, which were Ian Curtis and Johnny Rotten, or John Lydon. But Ian Curtis especially, I felt in a weird way closer to him than I did to any of my friends when I was growing up.
They just seemed so different to everyone else. Very hard to put your finger on what that difference is, but there was certainly a lot of intensity about Ian Curtis. That was one thing. But also I think it was in the texture of the music, in the sense that in 1976, 77, 78, music had been punk music, and then there was the groups like the Specials, and it was all about being fast and noisy and angry and in your face. And Joy Division kind of stripped all that away. It was the music had much more emptiness in it. And so it was charting a completely different kind of territory. So I think it felt very new, and it felt very different. And Ian Curtis was an amazing frontman.
My picture of Ian Curtis is on one side, kind of a very shy, quiet kind of guy, you know, liked a pint. You know, and then on the other side, you know, this incredibly incandescent performer. You know, it was almost like the one thing was just being held back until he had the stage, and then he would just let rip.
Stand to the radio. Stand to the radio. Stand to the radio. Stand to the radio.
He had a foam phobia, couldn't stand the stuff, couldn't go within an inch of it. But what we'd do is he quite liked, well, he wouldn't carry a flight case, but he quite liked to get in the flight case. Well, we had to put him in it, but because the flight case was lined with foam, he had to be specially insulated from the foam, and he'd wear a crash helmet. And we put him in the flight case, shut the lid, and push him down 3 flights of stairs at TJ Davidson's studio, and he loved it, and he thought it was fantastic.
Stand to the radio.
I remember first hearing Ian Curtis and really coming to grips with his lyrics and his vocal delivery, and somehow he made despair seem so poetic and so seductive, almost in the same way that Sylvia Plath did. You know, to take, you know, depression and ennui and despair and give them such poetic weight.
After 2 critically acclaimed Joy Division albums, Unknown Pleasures and Closer, on the eve of a tour to the United States, Ian Curtis, diagnosed as an epileptic, on hugely powerful prescription medication, and deeply depressed, committed suicide.
To be the guy who signed the check that paid for the labels on Atmosphere by Joy Division is actually such a privilege, and I kind of remain in awe of that sense of privilege. And you know, and I can be all flash and bullshitty and the twat that is the popular image or whatever, but deep down inside it's like, if that's the price you pay for being connected to this wonderful stuff.
months after the death of Ian Curtis, the 3 remaining members of Joy Division decided to go on. Following manager and factory partner Rob Gretton's advice, drummer Steve Morris's girlfriend Gillian Gilbert joined to form New Order, with Barney Sumner taking on lead vocals.
I think the genius, when Ian died, of not looking for another lead singer, not looking, but keeping the family, and bringing the drummer's girlfriend in, who'd already played guitar a couple of times, once at Eric's in Liverpool. A stroke of genius, you know, and to kick Barney into the middle of the stage.
I guess Rob was the nearest person to be a 5th member of New Order, yeah. Rob was unusual for a manager in that he spent all the time with us. If we went in the studio, he would be there. If we went on tour, he went on tour with us, you know. And that was a great thing in a manager, you know, because you know that someone is in it with you and they believe in you. You know, it means a lot to the band, I think.
Hello?
What are your ambitions then?
Okay, I'll ask him then. Alright, bye-bye.
What are my ambitions? My ambitions are never to work again. When I was 23, I decided that working was pretty boring. So I decided to give up working.
Really a fascinating journey to go from Joy Division, who, when they first began, were sort of like this very stern post-punk group, to New Order, who became this very, in some ways, romantic synth-pop group.
They were the missing link between Kraftwerk and the Chemical Brothers. They were at a key moment. They kind of took the idea of being a rock band into an electronic world that then by default became a dance world, and that was very unusual. There was a time when New Order were around, when, the early 80s, when there was a massive line drawn between rock and dance, and it was deemed that if you danced it was stupid and it was disco, and it was not a proper thing to do. I think New Order were very much part of the world that changed that thought, that you could dance and you could have that kind of fun, and you weren't necessarily, being a stupid idiot in a medallion. And so there was definitely a way that they were part of that change.
In February 1981, New Order released their first single, Ceremony, recorded an album, Movement, and the idea for a new club in Manchester was hatched, probably by Gretton and Wilson. The club was called the Hacienda, after a situationist essay, or Fact 51, in Factory's perverse cataloguing system. A former yacht showroom on Whitworth Street was expensively rented and redesigned. In serious disagreement with the idea of the Hacienda, Martin Hannett left Factory because he wanted to spend the funds on a Fairlight synthesizer. The Hacienda opened on May the 21st, 1982.
As far as I was concerned, it just had a lot to do with my budgets, which suddenly vanished down a hole in the ground called the Hacienda.
Is it true that you only opened the Hacienda to further your career as a disc jockey?
It's a good question, that. No. I never really had a career as a disc jockey anyway.
The Hacienda was really, from what I know, Rob Gretton and Tony Wilson and Mike Pickering's project, really. Except they used our money for it.
Tony says it was Rob's, and Rob says it was Tony's. Right. I don't know why it would be Tony's, but Rob's idea, which he'd touted to us because we had nowhere to go, there was nowhere for people like us to go in Manchester, which was absolutely true. Because you couldn't get in anywhere in Manchester dressed casually. You had to, it was like a Rotters crowd. Proper disco thing, you had to dress up to go out. And Rob decided, that we should have somewhere to go, him and Tony. And that was right. Tony'd already had the Factory, Russell Club, and run that quite successfully. Don't know what went wrong there. He soon put that right.
The Hacienda, for God's sake, someone came in when we opened and said, "Who did you build this for?" And we go, "Well, the kids." And they go, "Have you seen the kids recently? Did you go to that gig last week at Rafters?" "Yeah." "They're all wearing long raincoats, man. You built a New York disco, for fuck's sake." And we all went, "Oh."
The opening night was absolutely chaotic. It was shambolic, really. The sound was really bad. But worst of all, the blue floors were wet. And so to get from where the reception stairs, where you came in, you had to then walk along a plank onto the dance floor, which was dry, to get to the far end of the bar. So people were like, and if they came off, they stuck to the floor in their blue shoes. And it just wasn't ready, to be honest. It really wasn't ready. But it was a good night. We had Bernard Manning, who gave us our money back, said the place was a shithole and we needed the money to build it.
The Hacienda opened to a largely indifferent Manchester. New Order were not particularly pleased by their first album and changed musical direction. The single Blue Monday was the result and was heard for the first time by a small number of people at the Hacienda on January the 16th, 1983.
I could hear people try to make like tight, strict rhythm records with the real instruments. They try to get them really precise. I thought, well, what are they trying to do with those instruments? All that electronic equipment that we've been building up. We can do it without electronic equipment, and we can do it live.
For some strange reason, Steve always used to program under a chair, which I could never figure that out. And you say, why are you programming it under a chair, Steve? You go, oh, the mains lead's too short. I can't get it on top of the chair. And then about 3 weeks later, you say, well, why don't you put a longer mains lead in then? Oh, yeah. And I mean, we had it all programmed and ready to go, and then Steve pulled the plug lead out, and it dumped. The whole drum machine dumped the whole memory. And we had to reprogram it all dead quick from memory. And it was never the same. So we were never happy with it because we always thought that the one that we lost was better, like you always do. It's a sad fact of life working with computers.
The thing about Blue Monday was we used to get grief for not doing encores. And that's the kind of people, why do we just play for 15 minutes when you don't want any more, do you? People used to complain about it, so we thought, wow, that'd be great, this is Frankenstein's monster. Let's build a machine that we can play this song for us, and we can just press the button and we can sod off. Well, that'd be great, because then we'll be doing an encore, but not.
But of course I went and put a vocal on it and spoiled the concept.
How does it feel to treat me like you do? When you laid your hand on me and told me who you are. Thought I was mistaken. I thought I'd heard your words. Tell me, how do I feel? Tell me now, how do I feel?
Blue Monday was to become just about the biggest selling 12-inch of all time, and so became a perfect symbol for Factory Records' strength. A great tune by a great band, but also of the label's inherent weakness. The cost of Savile's seminal sleeve and the high production values meant every single copy they sold lost Factory 4p.
I thought the cover was fantastic. I thought it was a fantastic idea. It really was a fantastic idea. I just wish it hadn't have been so expensive. I mean, it was at that point, probably, that Factory started losing it because they lost so much money with Blue Monday that everything you did after it was paying back the debt from Blue Monday. And you just couldn't get over it, you couldn't. It was exactly the same thing with the Hacienda. You made a terrible, terrible mistake early on, and literally you were fighting that mistake for 15 years. Well, or in Hacienda's case, a collection of mistakes. In Factory's case, I think they lost that much money on Blue Monday, they couldn't afford to give us the same deal for the next record. We had to take a reduced deal with Factory for the next record, and that was when it all just started going.
There was never a marketing compromise. There was never a profitability compromise. Nobody ever questioned how much something was going to cost. Nobody ever questioned the fact that it didn't have the name of the group or the title of the album on the cover. I was at liberty to do things the way I wanted to do them, and I did them for myself. But in doing them for myself, it kind of touched a generation.
Not only was every sale of Blue Monday perversely costing factory money, but the Hacienda was also losing stacks of cash as it remained largely empty. Larger crowds did come to live music gigs, including one in the mid-1980s by local band The Happy Mondays, fronted by the soon-to-be legendary Shaun Ryder.
Rob also had great faith in us doing well in this business. I remember taking him a draw, some ash once, meeting him in the market and him saying, you know, you're too good for this, you should form a band. So we formed a band.
Well, first met, I can't really remember really. Yeah, it just sort of happened because I've always known them anyway, Gas and all them what used to go to our school. And we all sort of grew up in the same area, so we moved around the same friends and that for years, so it wasn't really like a meeting, you know what I mean?
There were people telling you you should make sure.
Yeah, that's you can remember it for me now, right? Was into all that style of music as we were growing up, you know what I mean? So Mondays we only wanted to join Factory Records, we didn't really want to join any, we didn't want to sign for another label, but we put all our efforts into getting ourselves on Factory. We kind of, what's it called? When you start, we stalked Factory Records, that's what we've done. We stalked anyone to do with Factory Record. We even got into the Elf Club and found Ucky's address, because one of the lads works as a postman, Paul, and got his address, and we turned up at his door with a tape. So, yes, Factory Records got well stalked.
Signed to Factory, the Happy Mondays released their first album, Squirrel and the G-Man, in 1987, but their heady rise was sealed by their second album, Bummed, produced in 1988 by temporary Factory returnee Martin Hannett.
He could produce while he was asleep.
How did that work?
And just basically sort of like managed to press buttons while he was just snoring. Recording Bummed, well, basically we just had a shitload of E and just was eating it from morning till night and giving it away to, I mean, there's an army base where we recorded the album, and we're in the club one night and some soldiers was in there watching us all off our faces and they all wanted to start fighting.
The Sergeant Major was like that, he has to in our face, so don't I fucking scare you then, you know, giving it all the Sergeant Major routine. It was like that, shoved the pill into his mouth, and next minute it was all like fucking full of love and didn't want to kill anyone anymore.
You know, they all started dancing like we was. And then there was all ended up wanting to quit the army and go for free love and join the big trip.
We took the Mondays on tour and gave them their first kind of big, you know, we went to see them. Remember Nathan, their manager, said, oh, you know, Tim, come and see, he was pretty friendly with us, me and Martine, said, come and see this great band I'm managing, great band. And he took us to Wigan to see him in a little club. And Shaun was so out of it that I think he came off after 20 minutes thinking he'd been on for hours. And they played literally about 4 songs and came off. And the rest of the band were like, Shaun! And he was like, we've been on for hours, man, we've been on for hours. He was obviously like off his head.
God, it was hilarious.
Well, they supported us. That was.
Oh, it was hilarious.
It was.
It was just.
They missed the first gig.
It was cartoon, yeah. Well, I think we played.
I know we played the first gig. They missed the second.
Yeah, we played the Ritz in Manchester the first night, and they were there all right. And then the next morning they couldn't find Shaun, and we were supposed to be playing. Well, we were playing Newcastle, and they were supposed to be supporting us, and they couldn't find Shaun, and they had to drive around like about 3 hours till eventually they found him, and they dragged him in the van and sped off. And of course they were late for the gig now, and they crashed the van on the way to the gig. Turns up at Newcastle, starts unloading the gear out of the van, and some bloke says, what are you doing? Said, oh, it was Happy Mondays supporting James, because you know this is Simply Red gig, we had the wrong venue. So this fellow came back in the van, turns up at our gig, they've missed their slot, we're just about to go on stage at this point, you know, they're like,
they'd pile out the van and the backstage, effing and jeffing and blaming each other for it, this, that and the other. And it was just like, I was like, oh God, what have we done? What have we done? Yeah. They were a complete and utter shambles, weren't they? They were. But they were so apologetic. They were lovely. They really were lovely. And they were cartoons. They were, it was just, what's happened today, and, you know, with the Mondays, you know. Is everybody here yet? Just about, I think, yeah. Oh, it's
And some of the music was amazing. I remember when I first heard them play Rope for Luck, that was definitely, that changed us and changed our music. That had an effect upon us, big time.
Pretty mad and Happy Mondays, like nothing you've seen before, I think, at the time. They just used to have this huge entourage and just be all on stage and having like this great party time.
Well, yeah, we had our own party on stage. We didn't give a fuck really about the audience. I mean, we really never did for quite a while. It was just to entertain us on the stage. It's only when we got more serious that we had to start giving a fuck about the audience.
Daily Telegraph. They reviewed a crazy gig at Wembley Arena in the Telegraph, and the writer, whose name I don't remember, which is remiss of me, said, while we marvel at the drugs and the craziness and the ecstatic atmosphere of the night, let us not forget the rhythm section. Paul Ryder and Gary Whelan of the Happy Mondays single-handedly, and with Sean's guidance and Sean's direction, single-handedly adapted the brilliant, innovative house rhythms of Chicago and Detroit from the mid-80s to British post-punk, Indian punk, and created a new music. And they did it. And, you know, God bless Primal Scream, and God bless late period Stone Roses, and every other bugger. Unfortunately, they had to copy the Mondays.
Well, basically, we turned dancing about into an art form. Like I said, people saw what we did and then thought they could do it. You know, he's a dancer, he can't sing, he can't play. I mean, we could.
We can't really understand how it happens, because Sonny Wilson was putting his money on Railway Children at the time for being the band for him, you know, some nice clean guitar sounding band. I don't know, it was just like, I suppose ecstasy played a big part, I reckon. Because we knew as soon as we got hold of these ecstasy pills that things were going to change, you know what I mean? Nothing was going to stop it, it was just too brand new, you know what I mean?
The Hacienda's DJs, led by Mike Pickering, introduced a club music policy focused on house tracks. This helped fuel the rise of rave culture in Manchester. Ecstasy was the party drug of choice, and the Hacienda, finally bought with a bridging loan, became the club of choice for thousands of young Mancunians. Combined with the heady rise of bands like the Mondays and the Stone Roses, the Hacienda became an integral part of the cultural phenomenon known as Manchester.
But I mean, you know, there's nothing, no matter what it cost us or whatever, when you used to stand there on a Saturday night looking out at that DJ box and you used to see, you know, 2,000 people going bananas, kids with guns running about, you know, mountains of drugs. And it was like, fuck it, now this is happening. You know, it really was like, wow, party time. Party Central, it was Party Central.
I think it was the people who went to the Hacienda, that's what made it so good. They were like ants all working together with all that freaky dancing ants creating something magical together, like socialism.
The clubs in this country, up until Heaven opened in 1978, 79,
were appalling. I mean, they really were. They were nearly always like in kind of church halls or, you know, scrappy basements, or they were very, very tatty with bad sound systems. And it was only when Heaven opened that there really was a club that you could take seriously. And I think the Hacienda was kind of like the next one on the list. That was the first one outside of London where you thought, yeah, this is a proper club.
I mean, Upmarket Warehouse would be a pretty good description for, you know, how crazy it sort of got. They definitely had that, its peak, it definitely had that sort of warehouse, acid house party mentality, sort of legal rave, really.
I remember first time, not the first time, but being in New York with Rob and Kevin Cummins, the photographer, and we were walking through a street in Greenwich Village. And we passed this shop, we were walking past, and they've got a Hacienda t-shirt. We never had Hacienda t-shirts at this stage, you know. And we're like, no, it can't be the Hacienda. So we go in the shop, and they've got Fat 51 on the back. And yeah, the guy knew about it. He goes, yeah, it's a hut. We were going, hey, what's all this? It's a hut club in Manchester. Oh, he said London, but, you know, and it was, well, everyone around the world knew it. It was Manchester, it was like one of Manchester's big tourist spots.
It created everything. It created a ministry of sounds. It gave everybody everything. You know, you open Mixmag, you open Ministry, you look at every club, they steal every graphic that Pete Saville ever did for the Hacienda, they steal every idea the Hacienda ever had. You know, I mean, it doesn't pay the bills, but I suppose it, you know, it must be good for your pride.
What the Hacienda did, and what Pickering in particular and Graham Park did, is they sort of almost threw everything else out and just concentrated on house music, and house music seemed to be their mantra. For everything that went on that club. So they really specialised and sort of, you know, got a lot more focused a lot quicker than clubs in the south of England.
The Hacienda was booming, as was the property market. So in autumn 1987, the dry bar premises were bought, along with a semi-derelict building space in Charles Street. Factory moved, after 12 years of barely contained chaos, from their office in a basement flat at 86 Palatine Road to the new space in Charles Street. In May of that year, New Order had their first #1 with the England World Cup anthem, World in Motion. All seemed good on both the shop floor and in the pricey new boardroom at Factory. In mid-1990, Factory seemed on the crest of a wave. They had large outgoings, but New Order, the Happy Mondays and the Hacienda were massively popular. However, there was trouble brewing. The lack of a clear business plan, once a force for creative good, had now become a serious liability. At the Hacienda, eat-up crowds bought no booze, the main source of income in any nightclub. When drug and gun problems forced the club to voluntarily close for 3 months in January 1991, the first weaknesses in the Factory edifice appeared to the public eye.
And the thing was is that we knew Factory were making shitloads of money because they had fucking fantastic offices, and a club that was losing a fortune a week when we were on 30 quid a week, you know. And Hacienda was losing 10 grand a month while we were on 30 quid a week. So we knew they had money. So it must have been working. And whenever Rob wanted money, he'd ask Tony for it, and Tony would give him money. I mean, the sad thing is that, you know, we were never accounted to for how many records we sold ever. So we still never know how many records we sold anywhere in the world while we were on Factory.
The Hacienda was not a sound business decision. It was only later on that New Order began to understand sound business decisions. But they chose to do what they wanted to do. I mean, a 7-minute single is not a sound business decision. An album without a title on it is not a sound business decision. You know, going on Top of the Pops and playing live is not a sound business decision. I mean, they did pretty much what they wanted to do, and they refused the discipline of a major record label.
I'm sick of going on about all these bleeding mistakes, but it was such a simple mistake they made that Factory paid our money. Instead of paying it into New Order Limited, he paid it directly into Hacienda Limited, which is fraud. Thanks to our idiot accountant, who Rob still used, which it never ceased to amaze me. So we got fined, and it took us 8 years to pay that fine back, just for that. They just made mistake on mistake on mistake. And there was some fantastic moments. It was like, I remember they used to pay people in cash at the Hacienda, you know, they had a cash book. You know, the guy who cleaned the windows would get a tenner. The guy who brought the barrels up would get 20 quid. So they used to write it down in the book so they could keep the accounts of the cash, of course. So anyway, the PAYE came on an inspection, and they had this idiot girl behind the counter who used to work for us who was somebody's friend. And the guy said, "Oh, hello, I'm so-and-so from the PAYE. I've come to look at the books." And she went, "Oh, you must mean this one here." Give him the cash book. And then about 3 months later, me and Barney went, and she was still fucking working. I hadn't even sacked her. And that got us the biggest fine known to bleeding man. It just was like that. It was just always, it was run by idiots.
I think decisions, well, certainly in my experience, decisions were made on a kind of ad hoc basis. I mean, if I ever phoned up Factory or the Hacienda to get a decision, whoever answered the phone would make the decision.
I've been to quite a few so-called board meetings where they've been rolling around the floor while everyone's been sat around the big table. They've actually been rolling around the floor, fighting, you know, about the maddest things. Half the time I didn't even understand what they were arguing about, you know. But then they'd get up, dust themselves off, have a smoke, and we'd all get on with it, you know, and have a good laugh about it.
Property values had crashed in late 1990 and Factory was hemorrhaging money to keep up debt payments on its buildings. Factory's property problems were intensified by the difficulties encountered in getting new albums out of both New Order and the Happy Mondays.
I always found strange about Factory's groundbreaking was if you threw a monkey in a room with enough money, then surely that'd do something groundbreaking. The groundbreaking was never tempered with any reality, and it was always tempered with huge budgets and, oh, that's groundbreaking, you know. Nobody's ever seemed to work between any... I mean, I must admit, we didn't either. You know, to let a group as stupid as we were go off to record in Ibiza was an absolute touch of surreal, man. Tony Wilson did say to me, he said, "This is the most expensive holiday you've ever had." And he was right. And then, lo and behold, a year later, he sends the Happy Mondays to Barbados.
In Ibiza, New Order had spent 3 months clubbing and not much else. Then in Barbados, the Mondays partied so hard, they ended up selling equipment from the recording studio to fund their Epicurean drug consumption. On their return to the UK, Shaun Ryder stole the master tapes, then sold them back to Factory for 50 quid, which was about 50 quid more than they were worth. There were no lyrics on the tapes, just backing tracks. On November 23rd, 1991, after unsuccessful attempts to sell themselves to London Records, Factory was declared bankrupt, shut down, owing £2.5 million. Their artists were not bound to the label by the terms of Wilson's bloodstained contract, so Factory owned nothing except a lot of unpaid bills.
The evidence was all around at Factory that money was being spent on things that was not going to come back. And I think it was fairly reasonable to know where the money was coming from. I mean, how many bands' records were selling? I mean, predominantly New Orders, and then I guess to a certain extent later the Happy Mondays. So, I don't know, there was a lot of shocked faces, you know, as when Factory finally went down, there was a, oh my God, what happened? And what's happened to our money, and where is it? And I thought it was pretty obvious what happened to it.
I mean, I remember going to the Skip and getting the B-side of Unknown Pleasures out of the Skip. So, I mean, there could have been a little more planning with that. I mean, you know, nobody else seemed bothered. I went and took the table out, personally. Got my friends to get a van and went and took the factory table out that cost all that fucking money, you know. They didn't even seem to bother at the end. They just let it go. You know, I was literally taking gold discs out of the Skip and going, who's fucking put this in here? And records out, and they're going, oh man, we're just fucking clearing it out, you know. It was like, it was horrible. It was like, you know, nobody cared about it dying. They didn't even care while it was dying. Nobody thought to take the stuff out and check that what you needed for the future was there, and you know, all that crap.
I mean, if it wasn't for Tony, really, Tony, Alan, Rob, Martin, all those people at Factory Light, Joy Division, New Order, it just wouldn't have happened. A band couldn't have achieved what we achieved, the way that we achieved it on any other record label, you know, without being given the complete and utter freedom that we were given and indulged.
People still talk about it now. I mean, I went out with some friends on Saturday night, and then they had some friends of theirs with them. And they spent all night talking about the friggin' Hacienda. You know, they watched on the ins and outs of it, all about the gangsters, how much money did you lose? Oh, it's fantastic, best club in the world, and all that crap. And I'm thinking, oh, God, it's going to be like this all my life. I'll be 65, sat drinking cider in a bench somewhere in town, and someone will be talking, no, you're the guy that used to have the Hacienda.
Now, Tony Wilson can probably give you 101 rationales as to Factory.
The rationale, I think the rationale was inside Erasmus's head somewhere. He never told us what it was, but it was inside Erasmus's head, I think. Or was there a rationale?
It's dead fucking simple. You don't like us, you fuck off. I don't like you, I fuck off. I'll write you a contract saying there's no contract. I'll write it in my own fucking blood. I'll do it, go on, I'll do it.
He's not going to write his own blood, is it?
Yeah. I'll do it.
You write it. No, don't give him a dirty knife,
in the words of the great prophet, I dares do out.
No, in real this.
Come on.
Oh,
There we go.
he's done it, he's done
Real
it.
blood, real blood. Tony.
How can you read that? I'm not sure if that'll stand up in court. What more do you want? He's just written a contract in his own blood.
Who is this man that follows me? This blue-eyed boy who wants to be this worthy cause of humankind. This path set up by time, like a bright light on the horizon, shining so bright, he'll get you flying, he'll drive you away, he'll drive you insane, but then on the move, all of your pain, like a bright light on the horizon, shining so bright, he'll get you flying, he'll get you flying, he'll get you flying, he'll get you
Tony Wilson's autobiographical account of the musical life of Manchester 24-hour party people is available now, priced $9.99. To order a copy, call 0870 1234 344 or click onto channel4.com/shop. A limited number of signed copies are available.